As preparation and during our biology class, BCA is now recommending this really excellent resource called Science Roots. This book has the students create note cards of all of the Latin and Greek roots that are really relevant to many of the definitions that are in biology. And because the definitions are typically the hardest part of biology, this will help make the students' life much easier while they're taking biology, because not only will they, or I should say, they won't just be memorizing all of these definitions. By understanding the roots, they'll be truly understanding, just based on the root words, what the words mean. And by learning some roots, they can learn multiple more actual full words. This presentation here is for students that are just starting to use this book during their year of biology. It's really recommended that they start the year before biology, just to take a little bit of the load off, because biology is a heavy year to begin with. But I will say that even despite that, even though biology is a heavy year, this has enough value. I really recommend that you have your students, or if you are the student, that you work through this book to help yourself out. So what you will need to use the Science Roots book, you will obviously need the textbook itself. You will need at least 230 index cards. You might need some more in case you make some mistakes, or in case you decide to add some more cards than what is the minimum required. I recommend 4x6 cards. The book technically says 3x5 cards is what they recommend, but I tried it with both and I really like the look of the 4x6 cards better, because I'm able to add a lot more space and it just looks a lot cleaner to me. Versus the 3x5, just looks really cluttered. And this isn't even the card that will have the most definitions that needs to be on it. There are some cards that have up to 6 definitions plus extra words, and I don't even know how you would fit that on a 3x5 card. So I really recommend using 4x6 cards. Along with those cards, you're going to need an index card box to put them all in, because with 230 cards, you really do need to keep them organized. It's also recommended to have a collegiate dictionary. Collegiate's not necessarily required as far as a dictionary version. It just can be helpful. And an online dictionary is okay too. So starting this book, The Year of Biology, what you're going to do is you're just going to start on the main list, starting on page 25. The way this list is numbered is that the number in the hundreds place corresponds to the Berean Builders biology chapter that the root is covered in. Some chapters teach more roots than others. Chapter 1 is a doozy. Chapters 2 and 3 each have 10 roots each also. And then as it progresses, some of the chapters have a lot fewer. So what you're going to want to do is look ahead at how many roots are in your chapter, and do 1 to 2 roots per day based on how much will be needed to complete the chapter in time. It does help to potentially start chapter 1 a week early. Again, like I said, that chapter is 14 roots, and those first roots that you do are going to take longer, and you'll see why. As I demonstrate it, because you're not just creating the note card for the one root, you're creating a note card for the one root plus all the secondary roots that are included in the example words. And then later on, you're going to go back and reuse some of the cards that you've already done. So in the beginning, it's a lot more work to take on. And so will help, especially for chapter 1, to start a little bit early, so you're not having quite as much work to do during the bulk of the chapter. So I just wanted to go through interpreting this root list. So starting here on the left, I already mentioned that these are the science roots numbers. And so this one here means that it's chapter 1. Most of them start with 0, 0, 1 after the hundreds place, and then 0, 2, then 0, 3. Chapter 1's a little bit different because this curriculum has another book that came before this one, and it's not required at all to use this one. It was called Vocabulary Vines, and it's the same kind of setup, learning root words, but they're general root words and not necessarily scientific root words. And the numbers in that book were numbered 1 through 100 something, and so they needed to start with 121, so there wasn't any overlap on the numbers. So then up here, I just want to point out that this column can either be the source, and by source, we mean the source language for the root, or the reference number, which is referring to the number representing the roots in the example words. Okay. And they'll be listed in the order that they appear. So 121, 126, we have meta and ball. And so 121 is meta and 126 is ball. The source language will be the top line of each root that's going along with the bolded root itself. And it should be GK for Greek or L for Latin. Then below that, you'll have one of three things. The first is potentially 3 or 4 digit numbers. So this particular root, all of the example words have just 3 or 4 digit numbers. And those are pointing to different science groups that will be covered in depth within this book. So for example, 807 is covered chapter 8. It's the 7th root that is covered. Then there's also numbers that have a V to the left of them, such as V76 here. And so this V represents that it came from that vocabulary vine book. And again, you don't have to have that book. All of these roots that came from that book are found in the glossary of this book. And just know that you will be making cards for those as well. They are considered important roots within this book. If you see a word here instead of a number, then that means it's a definition of an incidental root. And by incidental, it means that they're not going to spend quite as much time focusing on it. There are 2 types of incidental roots, though. The ones with the asterisks, like these 2, are an incidental but considered important. So we will still make cards for those, but there may not be a lot of other extra words that we add to those after we make those cards. If there isn't an asterisk there, we will not make a card for those words because not that they're completely unimportant, but we'll probably only see them one time, and so there's not a reason to try to memorize what they mean. So for each root here, let's just go through this. The first line will be the root and that root's definition and its source language. And then we'll have a set of example words and the roots that go into those example words. So metabolism has meta and ball. Metamorphosis has meta, morph, and osis, so 3 different roots. Then in the next column, we may or may not see definitions or pointing us to where to find the definition. So for metabolism, it's saying see the Discovering Design with Biology, chapter 1. So you will be able to look up that definition within your biology book. And then finally, we have the reference numbers. And again, that is pointing back to here where meta is the science roots number 121 and ball is science roots number 126. So let's go through how to make these notes cards and do the first card together. So we're just starting from the very beginning, chapter 1 from the main list, and the first word is, our first root is meta. So we're just going to write meta at the top of the note card. Then we'll write the definition of that root among, after, and the source language on the card. And we can use the same abbreviation. Then we're going to write the first example word on the card. So our first example word here is metabolism. And once we've done that, we want to start a card also for any other roots that are in the example word. Okay, so for metabolism, we had meta and ball. And so ball is another root that we want to start a card for. The only time we would not start a card is if it was an incidental root and it was not important. Okay, but because this is numbered 126, it is an important root, and we're going to go ahead and start a card. So we're going to look up this root in our root glossary, and it is, or because it's 126, you could look on this page or the next page. It'll be pretty easy to find. But we can look it up in the root glossary. The root glossary is all in alphabetical order, so easy to find those roots. And so for ball, and we see that it matches 126, 126. The definition of this root is throw or put, and it is also Greek. So we're going to write all of those things at the top, just like we did on the meta card. Now that we've done that, we're going to, and we're also going to write that example word that we're working with there. Now that we've done that, we're going to try to find the definition of the example word. Okay, so in this case, for metabolism, it says look in the book. So we're going to use the book because it states for us to do so. This one is found in the glossary of the book, or you could find it within chapter 1 itself. And so metabolism is the sum of all chemical reactions occurring in an individual cell to sustain life. I also want to throw up the ball card up here because we're going to use this in just a moment as we continue. I did want to add too, I guess I didn't have it on the previous slide, or maybe I did and I didn't say anything about it. Yeah, I did, and I didn't say anything about it. So I added a couple extra words for the definition of meta. You'll see meta is a hard one, and it doesn't really fit in the definition of these example words very well. And just doing some extra research, I found that there are a couple of other definition words that can be used for meta, including change and beyond. And so that'll give us an extra little bit of an idea of what some of these words mean and being able to place it well with the definition as we go with this one. I will say meta is a hard one. And it's nice that we're doing this as an example so that you're seeing a hard one. Not all of these root words are this difficult as far as fitting with the words that they are a part of. Okay, so metabolism. Okay, and we're going to just go ahead and take that definition and put it down. The sum of all chemical reactions occurring in an individual cell to sustain life. And we're trying to match the definition for meta itself and ball itself with the definition of this example word, metabolism. And so where we find words that are the same, we're going to underline them. Unfortunately, because just meta and ball too are just kind of weird as far as how they fit with the example words, we aren't able to do that. And that's going to happen sometimes. And so if that happens, you're just going to, instead of underlining the words in the definition that match the definition of the roots, you're going to instead just write the definition of those roots after and underline those. One suggestion I have here is with your underlines, use some different colors. So you could say meta is red, and so the word that matches meta is after, and underline that in red also. Ball is blue, underline put in blue also, and that'll help you match where in the definition or outside the definition in this case is with the roots in the example word. And so once you've done that, you're going to write the same definition and write it in exactly the same way for the example word on the secondary root card, the ball root card. So we're done with that example word. We're going to move on to the next example word. And so the next word on the list is metamorphosis. Here we have 3 different roots. So we have meta and 2 secondary roots, morph and osis. And so we're going to need cards for all 3. We already have the meta. We've added metamorphosis to it. I also didn't mention in the last one, we're going to, when we write these, we're going to point out the roots in the actual word by underlining them and really putting a space between the sections of the word that have those roots. So we have meta, which is underline, a space, and ballism. For this one, we're going to have meta, a space, morph, a space, and osis. And you notice that like ism is not underlined because that's not technically part of the root. Okay, so we're going to start the cards also for the other roots in the example word. So meta, we're going to do one for morph. Look in that root glossary, find morph. And the definition is form or structure, and it's Greek. I'm going to write all those at the top of that card. Then we're going to write that example word that we're working with underneath that. And the third secondary root, or the third root in this word, was osis. So we've found that here as condition or action, often abnormal, and Latin origin, and write that all there. And again, we'll put in that example word. So now we need to find the definition of the example word. We are not given it for this example word. And so we're going to have to use an outside source. So if you have a dictionary, you can use that. Or if you want to use an online dictionary, you can do that too. I would caution, if you use an online dictionary, don't just use Google. It's going to give you this AI result. And this is a really long, verbose definition, which is not ideal. We don't have enough room for that. We need short things. Use the actual dictionary. So don't do this. Go to the actual dictionary website and type in the word that you need the definition of. Okay. And so here we have definitions: a change in a physical form, structure, or substance, especially by supernatural means. That's not quite what we're looking for. This is a biology class, so we're not looking for the supernatural. A striking alteration in appearance, character, or circumstances, again, not relating to biology. So let's see if we can find a definition that is more appropriate to what we're looking for. For the second definition, a typically marked and more or less abrupt developmental change in the form of or structure of an animal occurring subsequent to birth or hatching. That is also a long definition, and so we're probably going to want to shorten it up. To help us out, let's look at the 2 secondary roots and the definitions that we had for them. So we had morph, form or structure. We have osis, a condition or action. And then we have meta, among, after, change, beyond. Okay, we're going to try to incorporate some of these into our definition. So here's what I came up with. Is the action So here we are taking osis, action of an organism, changing. This is where one of the reasons I added change to meta, and it is actually a definition of meta. Form is morph, significantly as it develops. And so I'm underlining each of these words that corresponds to the root. If I was going to color code it, I could say meta is red, and so changing is red, morph is blue, so form is blue, osis is purple, action is purple. Once I've done that, I'm just going to add that exact same definition to the secondary root card example words. And I am done with those secondary root cards now. With our primary root card, I'm going to move on to the next example word, metazoa. It has the example roots, meta and zoo, okay? And it gives us the definition, so that's really nice when it does that. I'm going to write down the example word here, separating it out, meta and zoa. And notice zoo and zoa. I want to keep the spelling of the example word so I can understand it. Okay, so don't just put in metazoo. Just go ahead and do metazoa, and you're actually going to see with this particular root word that zoa is another form of zoo. So it's fine, and that's going to be the case a lot of times. But you want to, like if it wasn't, I would just underline the zo part of it, because that is where that root is in the word. So I've started this example card. I'm going to start a card also for the other roots. So that other root is zoo, and that's 807. You see it's zoo or zoa, and it means animal, and the Greek is the source language. So I've got all of that on there and writing that example word. And I'm given that definition, so that's nice. I just put it in there and try to match the words. So classification of multicellular animals. Well, animals fits with zoa. If I'm looking at my zoa card, animal. And I really don't have a meta. I don't have among, after, change, beyond. Nothing really goes with this definition. So I'm just going to write it off at the end, among. Then I will write the same definition for metazoa on the zoa card. So then finally on our main card, we're going to add any extra words. So here we have metaphor and metaphase. And I like to do these in a completely different color than I've done everything else. So here I'm doing it in blue, just so I'm distinguishing. These are my extra words that don't necessarily require a definition. Okay, you do not have to write a definition for any of the extra words. In some cases, it might be useful for you to do it later. I wouldn't do it now, but later we might come across this word again as one of our main words, and it might be useful to write the definition then. In this case, we don't really have a lot of space, and so we're doing what we can. I could potentially put metaphor here and metaphase here and have space for a definition later, though, if I wanted to. If the secondary roots in these extra words are important roots, we will start a new card. But we're not going to write any example words. We're just going to do the bare minimum of starting a new card when we're doing it from the extra words. Okay, so for metaphor, we just did meta, and we have 4 as a secondary root, and it is an important one because it has a number corresponding to the first root in chapter 6. So we're going to look up that root in the glossary. We have 4 means bearer of, and it's Greek. And we'll do that. And that's all we're going to do for this card. It's done for now until we get to it later. When we go down to metaphase, phase is not an important root, okay? It's an incidental root because we have it written out as a word here, and there's no asterisk. So we are not going to make a card for phase. Probably because phase is a really obvious one. It means phase. So now we are done, finally, with the first root for chapter 1, and we are going to file these in our box in alphabetical order. So let's keep on practicing and go on to the next card, or watch this the next day that you're doing this to do your next card. You're first going to check to make sure that this card hasn't and any secondary roots have not already been started, okay? So from this point forward, before you start a new card, you're going to make sure you don't already have it, because there's a lot of spiral and repetition in here, and just going back and working on cards that we've already started. And that is one of the great things about it, because it's not going to be the one and only time that you're looking at this card when you first create it. So we are doing the second word root in the list, omni. And we see that omni means all, and it originates from Latin. And so we're going to put all of that at the top of the card. Then we're going to write the first example word, omnivore, separating it out with the two roots that make it up. Because we have a secondary root here, we're going to create a secondary root card. We don't have vor yet. And looking in the root glossary, we see that vor means eat or devour, and it is Latin in origin. So we add all that to the top of that card. We're going to write that example word that we've already been working on there, omnivore. And now let's go back to the omni card. We need to find the definition of this example word. So in the book, it tells us for this omnivore word to look at chapter 1. For this particular word, though, it's not in the glossary. Some of the terms pointing to the book for the definitions are not necessarily in the glossary, but they're important words in the book that are going to be bold in the book. So you can look through chapter 1 to find it, or you can use the index if you can't find them. So here I'm looking at the index and I see omnivores, and the only page number that corresponds to chapter 1 is page 20. And so then I look at page 20 and I found it within page 20, within this paragraph, and is talking about herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. And so we're going to just use context clues then to determine the definition. If you struggle with that, go ahead and open up a dictionary and do that. But this one's pretty simple. So an omnivore, I want to make sure that I'm using the root definition from my other root, vor, also if I can. So I need all and eat in there. And so I came up with one who eats. I really couldn't use all exactly because all has a very different meaning when you're talking about eating all plants and animals versus both. So I kept it as both, but in parentheses next to that, I put all because it is pretty similar. And so instead of putting it at the end, I put it next to both. So one who eats both, in parentheses, all plants and animals. Underlining each of those root definitions within the example word definition. Then I'm going to write the same definition for the example word on the secondary root card. Moving on to the next example word, I have omniscient. For this one, I'm given the definition, And so I can just go ahead and put this all in here. Omniscient means all knowing. Now the Shin part of this, or Cyan, which I wonder if you can figure out what science comes from. The word science comes from, based on this, means no. And so we have all and no. Because this is an incidental root word that has an asterisk, that means it's important. So we're going to go ahead and start a card for Cyan or Shin. So looking that up in the root glossary, we already know it means no, but our previous page didn't tell us what the origin was, so we know that from looking at the root glossary, and it is Latin as well. So we have Cyan, no, and Latin. Then we can put our example root word and that same definition that we got from the Omni card. Moving on to the next example word, we have omnipotent. This is quite similar in format to the omniscient. We have an incidental root word, so that we're going to end up creating a card for that. We're told that it means powerful. And so we're separating omni and potent out, showing those two roots, and we have all and powerful. Then we'll do the same thing, creating the secondary root card for potent. We have powerful, and when we look up the language source, it's Latin. And writing out the word and the definition there. So I've already kind of said this, but I'll say it again. Incidental roots in the book are any roots that don't have a number, such as 121 or V11, okay? They'll instead have the definition listed with the example word. The important incidental roots have that asterisk, and so we do want to make a new card for them because they're important to biology. The unimportant words, incidental roots, will have no extra markings, okay? And you don't need to make a new card for them. So example right here for cyto, we have pinocytic, right? Or cytokinesis is another one, where we're given the definition. So kinesis means motion. And if you needed to, that definition would still, even though it's considered an unimportant root, actually, no, it won't be, sorry. This is the only place we'll find the definition. It will not be in the glossary because it's considered an unimportant incidental root. There's no asterisk, it's unimportant. So we will not create another card for kinesis or pino in this. All right, so we are done with that one. So now we have 2 sets of cards finished, and we'll organize them all together in alphabetical order so that at any time we can flip through them and find the roots that we need. All right, we'll do one more here. So this is, again, we want to first check to make sure that this card hasn't already been started, and the same thing when we get to the secondary roots. So we have herb here, and we have not started herb yet. So herb here is our next one, and it means grass or non-woody plant, and it's Latin in origin. So we'll write those things down. And then our first example word is herbivore. So we have herbe. I have noticed I don't have the I underlined, so it's just extra on there, and vor. I'm going to now look and see if there's a card for the secondary root, which is vor. And if I remember, well, I just did that one, right? And so there is already a card for this additional root, and I'm not going to create a new one. So we already have vor with omnivore on it, and now I'm just going to add the example word to the card. Now I need to find the definition for herbivore. It says to look in chapter 1. And so this is that same passage that I found omnivores in. And so it says if heterotrophs eat plants, they are herbivores. So from that, I can gather that it's an animal that eats plants. I want to make sure I have this vor as part of my definition, so eat or devour. And so I have one who only eats plants as my definition, and I have eats and plants underlined corresponding to eats equals vor and plants equals herb. I want to add that same definition now to the secondary root card. And start on the next example word. So now I have herbarium, and we're given the definition for this one, a plant collection or where it is kept. I have two roots here, both are important. And so I'm going to add herbarium here and the definition that I've already been given, plant collection or where it is kept. And then I'm going to make a card for the secondary root word because I don't have arium yet. And so I find that arium, it actually has three different, I guess, versions of the same root. We're going to write them all together. So we have arium, ari, and tori, which all mean a place for, and its origin is Latin. And we'll write the example word and definition that we already have. So now what I need to do is figure out where in the definition I can underline to match the definitions of the roots, or if I need to just add the definitions of the roots at the end. So I have plant, so that's easy. I can underline plant on both of these cards. And then a place for. So there's two ways you could do this. You could say where it is kept. That's a perfect set of words that means place for, and underline all of that together. That would be acceptable. Or you could separately put place for and underline that right after the definition. It's whatever helps you understand and remember these words the best. All right, now the third example word, we have herbicide, which has the two roots herb and cid. We're given the definition here, a substance which kills plants. So I've already added all of this to here. Let's start on the secondary root word card. So cid, and I actually see it can be cid, side, or cis as spellings of this, and it means cut or kill. So this two roots here means there's actually two completely different meanings of this root that is spelled the same. And we're just going to make it one card. And Latin and origin, so we'll put that all on there. So we're going to add herbicide as our example word and the definition. Now put these cards together and look at the root definitions to find how we do that. And this one's pretty easy. We're going to underline plants and kills. Plants and kills. Then we can add any extra words. So here we have just herbaceous as the extra word for herb. Aceous here is not an important root. You see here, it just says suffix. So all this means it's just a generic suffix that we are not going to try to have any kind of definition for. And in fact, aceous, all it does is turn this noun into an adjective. I wanted to show you another example card So this is the example card for hypo. So for this one, we would have hypothesis, an educated guess that attempts to explain an observation or answer a question. And here you could tell, like, there's no way to, like, it's really hard to find a way to make under and put the two root definitions as part of the definition of hypothesis. But in other cases, it's very easy. We have hypodermic, and hypo is under, beneath. Derm is skin. It's great. Hypothermia, below. Therm is heat. We're just going to put it with temperature, right? Below normal body temperature. And then here we have 3 different extra words. Some of these are going to come into play later. Hypoglycemia, I know for a fact, will be a example word that we will use later when we do glyce. There are some roots that may have so many terms that you're going to have to either make the card look a lot more messy or split it into 2 cards. My personal preference would be splitting it into 2 cards because I don't like the messy, but this is completely up to you. This curriculum is to help you, and so you use it in the way that best helps you. But so for hydro, for example, we have 6 example words that we need to write definitions on before we even get to the 4 extra words. Plasm is crazy with a number of words. And so what I would probably do is just go ahead and create 2 cards with that. And how I would do that is I would keep the top the same, except say part 1 and part 2, and then have everything under that different for each of those 2 cards. So every time you finish a set, add it to your card box in alphabetical order. So at this point, after having done 3 roots, we have 3, 6, 9, 12, 14 cards. But some of them we will be using later, and it reduces the number of cards you have to use later. So keep that in mind. It's a lot of work, a lot more work up front, but it has a payoff. I did want to point out there is the Appendix A, which has a taxonomy chart. It has lots of taxonomy words and their roots and definitions, which can be really helpful. The one thing I do want to note is that some of this appendix is out of date. For example, Monera is not used anymore as in the taxonomy. Many of the phyla in here are not used anymore. They're categorized differently now. So just make sure that you are looking at the more up-to-date stuff, like your biology book, or asking your teacher if you have a question. This, I believe, probably was accurate when it was written with, originally, this curriculum was written for the Apologia biology way back, one of the versions that Dr. Weil wrote. So it was probably accurate then, but since then things have been updated, and they did not update this part of the book, even though they updated this book to work with the Berean Builders Discovering Design with Biology book. There is one other option for doing this curriculum and reducing the biology workload. Actually, there's 2 that I'm going to give you, but here's one that the book recommends. There is another list in here that is biology only, and so there's 90 main roots here versus 122 in that full list. So you have a little bit less. This is on page 75 of the book, so you could potentially go through this instead. It's not going to be as effective as doing all of the roots. Those roots for the main list were chosen for a reason. But if you're really pressed for time, this could help. I will say, though, that the early chapters are unchanged. There are still 14 roots for chapter 1. There are still 10 for chapter 2. There are still 10 for chapter 3. So it's still quite heavy in the heaviest parts of the workload. So it might not be that much help, and really just more effective doing all of the roots anyways. But I did want to share that this is there. A better option to reduce your biology workload, if you are watching this now, hopefully well before biology has started and it's still summer, or even earlier, start working through this first year list over the summer. Just get a little bit done. Do a couple a week. You won't get through them all. And so act like you're doing a 2-year plan, but you're probably not going to finish this whole first year. Okay. You won't get through them all if you're just starting during the summer, unless you are really working at it. And I don't think you need to, but you will get the hang of it. And so you'll already have that down and less of a learning curve on this book when you're first starting biology. And you'll also be making a big dent so that there's less to do during the biology year. And you'll already have learned many of the roots, which gives you a head start on learning those definitions. So for example, chapter 1, which has the 14 roots in it, if you did these over the summer, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that you'll have already done. And 8 is a little bit more manageable to get done than 14 that first couple weeks that biology is starting. So if you can, I would recommend this. If you're unable to do the 2-year plan, but you have some time this summer, right before you're taking biology, just work through some of these and get some of this pre-work done before biology, and that could be really helpful. So I hope that this whole little tutorial has been helpful for you, and that this whole Science Roots curriculum can be really helpful for you understanding and getting the most out of biology as well.